and welcome to the Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton. And so it's Sean Dyche. Sean Dyche is the man that we have gone to replace Frank Lampard. It's been a bit of a shorter saga than I was perhaps expecting. Obviously, Lampard was officially announced as sacked on Monday, and now Sean Dyche has, of course, come in. And I was expected to take a lot longer than this, I'll be honest. And there was also a large part of me that thought it wouldn't be him until towards the end of the week when it was pretty much narrowed down to Bielsa and Dyche. I think it was quite clear who we were going to go. I think Dyche was probably the safer pair of hands, I'd say. And so yeah, I'm quite pleased with this appointment. It's got to be said, and I hope a lot of Everton fans, well, I hope the entirety get behind him, and hopefully we can all join together to fight, of course, against relegation. So yeah, we are going to be joined in a moment by Joe from the Turfcast podcast, who Burnley fan who can tell us all about Sean Dyche, of course, and knows a ton more than any Everton fan could possibly do. And so let's join him now to get his thoughts. And so we are joined by Joe from the Turfcast podcast to tell us a bit more about what we can expect. How are you doing, Joe?
Yeah, good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. You know, I'm glad that it seems we finally got something done a bit quickly and with some sort of semblance of a plan, possibly. I'm not sure, but
yeah, I mean, just from the outside looking in, I'm not sure there was actually a plan, because you couldn't be any further apart, could you? In Bielsa and Dyche, like the styles are different, everything's completely different. So I'm not sure there was a plan as such, but there will be a plan now going forward, at least on the playing side of things, anyway.
And obviously, it's almost deja vu with last season, getting Lampard in during the January transfer window. It ended up being announced on deadline day, and hopefully now, if it gets announced, I'd imagine over the weekend at the very least, it might give us a bit more leeway to try and actually get some much needed signings in. But
Ashley Barnes is available.
Yeah, I can imagine he'll be all over that. But yeah, of course, from the Burnley perspective, you mentioned Bielsa there as well. When obviously the stronger links, I'd say, were probably more in the start of the week, and it did look for a while like Bielsa was going to be our man. And when that was all going on, a lot of Leeds supporters seemed really opposed to it, and I'm not sure if it was a bit like kind of protective almost of, especially in English football, Bielsa almost being one of their own. And obviously Burnley Burnley fans will have a very similar relationship to Dyche. So from what you've seen, what has been the reaction from Burnley fans with all the Dyche links coming in?
Yeah, I mean, Leeds fans have got these delusions of grandeur, haven't they? Like they're the biggest club in the country and that sort of thing, which obviously just isn't the case. As Burnley fans have always seen, me personally, I'm happy for him. I really wanted him to get a job. People were saying, he should have to go back to the Championship and prove himself again. Like, why should he? He's done more than enough at Burnley, to be able to get another Premier League job. And I always felt that the natural progression from Burnley after what he'd achieved was Everton. I'm just a little bit gutted for him that he's had to join you in such a mess, because you just seem to get worse and worse and worse year on year on year, like top all the way down. It just seems to get worse, and now he's joining you in such a mess where it is going to be very tough to keep you up. But Burnley fans, in the main part, are happy for him. There's some fans that are probably a little bit bitter from last season that you stayed up and we went down, and then took a couple of players that have just sort of like gone, oh no, horrible club, I ought to go down. But that's very, very few and far between. Most Burnley fans are just happy for Dyche and hope that he does well now. And I personally will be hoping that it can keep you up, definitely.
Mm. And you mentioned there as well about last season and Burnley going down. And of course, towards the end of the season, the club took the decision to sack Dyche. And I remember from like I say, from an outside perspective looking in, I was very surprised at that. And there was a lot, I think, and even though there was a bit of a bounce, wasn't there? Under I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, I'll be honest. But
Mike Jackson, it were
Mike Jackson. Yeah, I think you might have won the first 3 games, like once he came in or something like that. And there was a big bounce, but obviously it just wasn't quite enough to keep you up. And obviously that's almost still a blemish on Dyche's record, because he was sat so late, and a lot of the opposition from Everton fans towards appointing him have been that he all but took Burnley down in the end. So why would we be going in for him? But is there a part of you that believes that if you'd stuck with him, he might have been able to keep you up? And what was the reason behind it finally ending in the way it did for him?
No, I think we'd have gone regardless, if I'm honest with you. And although Dyche isn't completely like devoid of responsibility. It was partly his fault that we went down. It wasn't mainly his fault. The reason when we went down is lack of investment, just years and years and years of stagnation. Like, there wasn't players leaving, there wasn't players coming in, and you need like a conveyor belt of players. Like, you need, like, look at when we sold Michael Keane, for example. Obviously we went to you guys. We sold him, and then we brought in players like Tarkowski. Players that ended up being better than what he was in a Burnley shirt. There was like a natural progression of players coming in and out, whereas it just stagnated at Burnley. And when you're saying the same things to the same ears all the time, it's the same in any walk of life. It's going to get a little bit stale, and that's exactly what it did. It got stale. It needed backing. It needed backing better. Some people might point to the fact that we brought in Maxwell Cornet, Nathan Collins, and Wout Weghorst in his final season. But I think by then it was too late. I think just the years of stagnation hadn't helped, and that's why we went down ultimately. But like I said, it is not. He has some responsibility in it. It's not just because we didn't invest. It can be a little bit stubborn. He has his favourites. Certain players he can't really get. He's not great with wingers. Probably because he plays more in a 4-4, like 4-4-2, two banks of four, that sort of thing. Or he did at Burnley. I would like to point out a lot. I know a lot of the criticism of Everton fans have just been, "Oh, it's terrible football. It's boring. I don't want to watch it." We didn't play like that in the Championship. We played really good, free-flowing attacking football with the likes of Andre Gray, Danny Ings. Some very good footballers. So if he's backed by your board, he could bring in some decent footballers and maybe play similar to the way Burnley did in the Championship the year that we won it. But yeah, when we got to the Premier League, he did sort of like just stick to your rigid 4-4-2. And I think for the first 6 months, that's exactly what he's going to do with you guys. I think that's pretty much what you need. I just think you need to be solidified, become hard to beat, and then, baby steps for the first couple of weeks, first month or two, and then try and kick on from there.
You mentioned there about like loyalty to certain players, like and his stubbornness. Do you think that's one of like his biggest weaknesses, really? And obviously, we actually spoke in the summer about when Dwight McNeil signed for us, and he was one of the ones that I think seemed to be at the centre of a lot of frustrations. Can you imagine him being one of Dyche's favourites again here? It's probably not what Everton fans want to hear, I'll be honest.
No, I put a tweet out last week, actually, of, the scene from The Office where Ricky Gervais is going on a blind date and that girl walks in and she goes, whatever his name is in the office, I can't remember, and he goes, "Oh, for fuck's sake," because he's gutted that she walks in and she's not like dead attractive. Like, obviously, I put that out saying Dwight McNeil when Dyche walks into Finch Farm next week. I can't see. He didn't really get the best out of him, Dyche and McNeil, because he's more of a traditional chalk on your boots winger, I think, McNeil, or maybe a wing back. As I know some people wanted him to play at Burnley, but he never really got the chance. So I'm not sure he'll get the best out of McNeil. If anything, McNeil might be moved on. I'm not sure, which is probably music to Everton fans' ears, because from what I've said, he's not done too well. But Tarkowski will play very, very well in a Dyche system. He played very well in a Dyche system for the last 4.5 years or whatever it was. You might even see Michael Keane's career, rejuvenated, because it's a low block. It's not easy to defend him, but it's easier to defend him for players that don't have much pace or players that aren't that good on the ball, like Michael Keane especially. Tarky's better on the ball than Michael Keane, but he's not great on the ball. So it's going to be interesting to see how he comes in and deals with them three Burnley players, especially McNeil, because I think when McNeil first burst onto the scene, he was brilliant at Burnley. And then it kind of just sort of like was people you say Dyche coaxed it out of him because Dyche likes a certain system and stuff like that. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. But he asked McNeil to do a lot of defensive work, and you can tell McNeil doesn't like doing that, and he gets annoyed. He shrugs his shoulders, he sulks, and he mopes back into position, which is never endearing to the fans. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does with McNeil, definitely.
And you said as well there about especially at the start of that long spell you had in the Premier League, the conveyor belt of players almost, and being able to replace players which kind of dwindled towards the end. But would you say that on the whole, Dyche had quite a good record in the transfer market and was quite good at almost unearthing gems, if you will?
It's hit and miss, if I'm honest with you. He's had some stinkers. Ben Gibson, for example, Jelly Vossen. Some people just come in and they don't like Dyche will instill a certain culture into Everton. It's not a bad thing. it will at Burnley. You weren't allowed headphones on the coach, for example. You had to, proper old school stuff. You had to have your shirt tucked in. It's going to be interesting to see if he does that with Everton because I'm not sure how players like Dominic Calvert-Lewin are going to respond to being told that you have to do certain things in certain ways. And say, for example, if someone like Richarlison were there, if Sean Dyche came in and said, "Nah, tuck your shirt in, mate. What are you doing?" I can't see that going down very well with bigger sort of players. So whether or not he does the same thing he did at Burnley with you guys, I'm not so sure, but it will instill like a culture of hard work, and that's the main thing I think at the minute that you guys need. But it's going to be interesting to see if he does things in certain ways. Because when Maxwell Cornet came in, for example, like I mentioned earlier, he never really found a way to utilise Cornet to his full potential, I think, did Dyche. And rumours have it that Dyche and Cornet didn't get on at all. It were a proper culture clash. And obviously Cornet's from the Ivory Coast and Dyche is like a proper little Englander. You have to do things my way sort of thing. So it will be interesting. But I would imagine he'll try and implement a similar sort of thing at Everton that he did at Burnley. Probably not as strict because I'm not sure, like I said, our club like Everton are going to respond. Players at Everton are going to respond to being told that you can't really use social media. You have to tuck your shirt in. You can't wear headphones on the coach and things like that. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does. I think he'll do it like a not as strict. I think he'll bring something in like that, but probably just not as strict because he'll know that some players just won't respond to it.
Yeah, so I mean, with that being the off the field things, if you go into on the pitch, and one of the biggest criticisms Lampard had during his time here was his in-game management, and a lot of fans took a lot of criticism to say some of the substitutions he made and changes of formation, whatever, within the match, and not reacting to things quickly enough. What would you say Dyche was like during that, and is that something that you think will be an improvement?
It'll be an improvement on Frank, definitely. I think everything Dyche will bring in will be an improvement on Frank, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. Frank's a lovely man, great player, but I just don't think he's cut out for management. If I'm being honest with you, Sean, he'll come in. He's got a proven record of keeping a team up for the majority of the time he was there on a shoestring budget. But he'll come in, and the in-game management thing's a little bit different because with Sean, it was plan A, and he always stuck to plan A, but we never really deviated away from plan A because we never really needed to. Subs and stuff were criticised, but every manager gets criticism for subs and stuff. But I think the in-game management, it was a case of always sticking to the original plan more than anything. You'd very rarely see him change formation during a game. Subs would mainly be like for like, unless you were losing 1-0, of course, and obviously you stick an attacker on for a midfielder or whatever. But I seem to remember his in-game management being quite good, but that was because the plan that he'd set out beforehand would always be instilled into the players pretty well, and you never really had to sort of like deviate from that after 15 minutes, for example, because it wasn't working. The only times he ever really got stuffed, and I'm sure if someone goes through Burnley's fixtures, they'll prove me wrong, but the only times he ever really got stuffed is when we played Man City. Man City has stuffed us every single time. So when you go to the Etihad, you can expect to get beat 5-0 because that happened every single time. But yeah, there was never really any need to change it up too much during a game, if I'm honest.
I can remember that being a bit of a meme at the time. That
actually, I've just remembered another team that stuffed us. You stuffed us on Boxing Day, so a few years back.
Yeah, I do remember that. That was a strange time for us. But yeah, I remember they used to say that, and it was like one of those myths that City definitely play Burnley at the Etihad at least 5 times a season and beat them 5-0 every time. Honestly, it just seemed to happen every year.
It did, because we would get them in the cups as well. It were a running joke in Burnley, like, FA Cup third round, City away, and it would be City away for 3 years in a row. Either in the Carabao Cup or the FA Cup, we got City away. It were ridiculous, and of course we played them in the league as well. So, yeah, that meme is pretty correct.
Obviously, yeah, you mentioned as well about Dyche wanting to leave his imprint on the club. Well, I imagine, having been at Burnley so long, I imagine that was something he was able to do. Obviously, I'm sure you'll be aware that the situation at Everton is not a healthy one, and there's literally an article that's went up on the Daily Mail today which kind of details all the kind of infighting and factions going on in the club, and it makes me believe that it's going to be very hard for Dyche to, at the very least, straight away get a grip on the club and steer it in the direction he wants to go in, and therefore, do you think that's going to hinder him quite a bit? And obviously, he would have been so used to almost being the main man at Burnley, and having to go into this system now. Do you think it might be someone he thrives in, or do you think it'll go the other way?
I'm not sure. The toxicity surrounding your club at the minute does worry me for him. If people are chasing players down the street and stepping in front of cars to talk to them or whatever, that's only going to go one way. But put it this way, if somebody chases Dyche down the street, they won't do it again. I promise you, they will not do it again. He will not stand for it. Remember that time when Burnley beat Liverpool at Anfield and Klopp tried to chase him down the tunnel? Klopp stopped in his tracks. All Dyche did was turn at him. So he's going to go in, and he probably will be able to sort that sort of stuff out. Sort of like players arguing amongst each other, that sort of thing. It will, like I said, he'll instill a us against the world sort of mentality for these next 6 months, and that's what you need, in my opinion. I do worry that, like I said at the top of the interview, top of the show, that I'm a little bit worried about how much of a mess you are in at the minute, because it just seems to get worse and worse and worse year on year. Like I said, I've always seen Everton as a natural progression, but I saw you as a natural progression 4 years ago, and you're in quite a healthy position. Whereas now, obviously, you're not in a healthy position, and there just seems to be fighting, like you said, in the club, around the club. So that needs to stop. But I think that might stop on the fan side of things once results start coming in. And I think if you see 11 lads on the pitch at Goodison fighting for the shirt, putting tackles in, wanting to play for the club, wanting to win games, knowing what their plan is, you lads will feel a lot better about that, and you probably won't chase cars down the street because of it. And that Dyche will 100% do that, whether he keeps you up or you go down with him. You will be able to look at them lads on the pitch and know that they've left everything out on the pitch. So I do think that's the sort of thing it will thrive in, to be honest.
Like I completely agree. It's definitely a case of stemming the tide, and
yeah,
I think I speak for a lot of Everton fans when I say, especially this season, the issue hasn't really been with on the pitch. It's been off it, and it's been the people allowing the situation to be where this squad probably isn't good enough for us to stay up, if we're being completely honest. And maybe it is if it's utilised correctly, or I don't know. And I imagine we'll see with a manager like Dyche, but it's much less about the players and much more about who's allowed us to get into this situation in the first place.
Yeah.
And with the Dyche appointment, it's probably quite a negative outlook, but I honestly think in the back of my head, a lot of it is to do with, if we do go down, Dyche has got a very good chance of getting us straight back up again, similarly to what you guys have done this season with Company, flying straight back up, clearly going to ease your way through the league and get straight back up. And then it's just a case of building on that. And like you say, you mentioned about how well Dyche played in the season. Obviously, it was quite rare for when you went down in 2015 for a club to stick with him, and obviously it paid off. You got straight back up and had a long spell in the league. So obviously our club is in a very different situation to what you were in at and then, and a lot of the things seem to be that if Everton do go down, it could almost be a Sunderland situation where we fall like a stone. But do you think with a manager like Dyche, he's got a very good chance of, even in a bit of a free fall, he might just be able to steer the tide in the right direction?
Yeah, if Dyche is backed in the Championship, if God forbid you get there and you stick by him, it will take you back up 100%. I can't remember when we won it, 2016. So this is like, my maths is terrible, like 8 years ago. But we were spending 9 million on players like Andre Gray at the time. For a club but we're getting criticised now because we've just spent 7 million on Lyle Foster from South African striker, a Championship club saying, you're buying the league. But we were spending 9 million quid 8 years ago on Andre Gray. He came in, scored 20 goals, fired us to the top of the league, and we won it. We went 23 games undefeated in the second half of the season. I think we were 5th or 6th after losing on Boxing Day against Hull, may have been Middlesbrough. And I remember thinking, we only lost 5 games all season the first time we went up under Dyche. We've lost 5 already now on Boxing Day. We're probably going to lose more and maybe not go up. But we didn't lose again from the rest of the season. We're just a machine. And Dyche will turn you into that if he is given the time, if he is given the patience from the fans, and if he is backed. But they're 3 very, very big ifs, I think, from Everton at the minute. I worry if you go down, Dyche will get hounded out by the fans. Honestly, I do. There'll be graffiti outside Goodison, that sort of thing. But I'm just looking at the league table now. But you're 2 points off safety. You know what I mean? You're not doomed at all. 5 points off 14th. You know, I think Dyche is good enough to get you 5 points. You know, in the next like 3 or 4 games. I haven't even seen who you've got. You might have Real Madrid or Arsenal. You know, something like that.
We do actually have Arsenal and Liverpool as our next 2 games. So
yeah, well,
maybe after that we've got some quite favourable fixtures, which I think will
honestly,
probably make or break our season.
He has a decent record against Arsenal. You know, we drew a lot of games against Arsenal. I think we drew 0-0 there. You even went down under him, for example. So who knows? You could go there and absolutely shithouse a point. That's what he will do. He will make you hard to beat. He will make you frustrating. It might be frustrating for some Everton fans to watch it, but I think right now, if you're being picky about style of play and the position that you're in, then you've really got to look at yourselves. You're not in a position to be picky about style of play. And I know Big Sam had a similar issue, but again, he kept you up quite similar. And I don't want to put Dyche in the same bracket as Big Sam because I don't think he is. I think he can be there for a few years if you let him, and he keeps you up. Which, just looking at the league table now, I don't see how with Sean Dyche you go down in that position. Honestly, I don't.
Well, yeah, that's very encouraging words. And like I said, I hope I speak for a lot of Everton fans when I say I don't care how we stay up this season, just as long as we do. And it's this time it's a case of building on in the summer. And I don't know, I'm slightly encouraged. I'm happy with Dyche than I would have been with Bielsa. I think Bielsa would have been far too big a risk, especially at this point in the season. 100%. And like you say, I think Dyche just brings a lot more stability. So yeah, I think that pretty much answers the last question I have from really. That I think you'd agree with me that it is quite a good appointment, and that the belief is there that he can keep us up.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, I know you just mentioned it. Then look at some of the other candidates you were linked with. Bielsa, absolute car crash. If you'd have appointed him in the summer, for example, and he had a full transfer window, maybe that would have worked. It looks like he has a shelf life. Does a bit of Bielsa like he did at Leeds and pretty much everywhere he's been at. So that might have ended up in a bit of a car crash in 3 years, but I think it'd have been a good ride. You'd have all enjoyed it. Carlo Ancelotti's son. Why would you bring in somebody with no experience in a relegation battle? Again, he's another one, potentially in a summer under somebody like Bielsa, for example. I don't know, that would have worked. That could have potentially worked. But in the situation that you're in, Sean Dyche is the perfect thing. And I honestly believe he will get you play into a similar way and a similar standard and a similar position in the table. Maybe not fourth, but a similar position to the table that he did in the Moyes era. And I think that's exactly what you need right now. But first things first, just shithouse your way to staying up. But I think you can do that with Dyche.
Well, yeah, that's definitely made me feel better. It's got to be said. So, yeah, I hope a lot of Everton fans listening to this can rally around that as well. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all we've got. So thank you very much, Joe, for speaking to us, and like I say, for making us feel a bit more optimistic about the whole situation. Please leave a like if you enjoyed. Comment giving your thoughts on the potential appointment in the comments below, and we subscribe to the Toffee channel for more Everton content, and we will see you in the next video. Cheers.